Welcome to my kitchen. Whether you called her Mom, Grandmom, Mom, or Audrey, everybody got excited when it was time for her banana bread. This is her hugs, her I love yous, all rolled up into one. It's not complicated, and it can be mixed up in no time. The smells fill the house, and I can almost hear her voice. Food can be so simple and so powerful, all at the same time. You should have most of the ingredients on hand. And this is the best way to use up those brown bananas. Actually, the browner the bananas, the better. It means that they're going to be super sweet and super soft. Okay, we're going to start with getting the wet ingredients together. And the bananas you can use anywhere from medium to large bananas. You need 3 of them. And I like to mash them up with my pastry cutter. If you want to use an electric mixer here, you absolutely can. I don't always like to pull it out, so I find that the pastry cutter works best. Cuts them up into smaller pieces. So we want those mashed up. And like I said, the browner they are, the better. They're softer. They doesn't take as much to get them mashed up. And the sweeter they are. So once we get them all mashed up, we'll put the other ingredients in. And we need 2 eggs. I do use the extra large eggs. They seem to be just the right amount. Sometimes if you have just the large eggs, you might want to use 3. But the 2 eggs with the extra large works perfect. And then once we get the eggs in there, it's a good idea if you can keep your ingredients at room temperature too, and not have your eggs ice cold. The bananas, if it's room temperature, things mix up better and they get combined a lot easier. So we'll get the eggs in there. And after the eggs get in there, we're going to use canola oil. It's a half a cup of oil. Any plain oil. I wouldn't use olive oil. It's a little strong for this. So I'm using canola oil. Use vegetable oil. Something that doesn't have a lot of flavor to it is what you want to use. And like I said, that's a half a cup of oil. Get that in there. And then after the oil is the sugar. Now, sugar is not a wet ingredient, but this is the way Mom did it, so this is the way I do it. It works better. I think what it does is it helps the sugar dissolve, and it gets it evenly distributed through everything. So get the sugar in there. Okay, and that's going to be a cup of sugar, just plain granulated sugar. And I wouldn't use anything different than that. You don't want to change the flavor too much by using brown sugar or anything like that. So after the sugar comes the vanilla. I try to use pure vanilla extract, not the imitation. And it just has a better flavor as far as I'm concerned. And that's a half a teaspoon of vanilla. And we're going to get that whisked up. And you want to beat it pretty good here. You want the eggs well beaten. This is where the rest of your banana pieces will get broken up a little bit more. And everything will get combined really well. Get just a little bit of air in there. Get it fluffy. So it does take a good mix. Like I said, if you wanted to use an electric mixer here, you can. I just think it's fun doing it this way. That's the way Mom did it, so that's the way I do it. That's another thing that's nice about this recipe, is it's not complicated. It's not a big production. Most of the ingredients you should have on hand, and it's, it comes together very easy. Sometimes the hardest thing getting is the 3 bananas that you need. Okay, once the wet ingredients is all mixed up and you've gotten the banana lumps out of it, we're going to do our dry ingredients. And we're going to start with some all-purpose flour. It's plain white flour. I do use the unbleached flour. And we need 2 cups of that. Get that measured out. You could probably use maybe whole wheat flour or maybe oat flour. That might work nice in there. But you don't want to use all whole wheat flour. So if you have a mixture, that would be good. But I would try to stick to mostly all white flour. So we'll get that in there. And then next is the salt. And that's a half a teaspoon of salt. Goes in. That helps with our flavoring. And after the salt, we will get the baking powder and baking soda in there. And the baking powder is a half a teaspoon. Get that in there. And the baking soda is a teaspoon. And you want to try to make sure that these ingredients are newer and fresher. It makes them work better. So if they've been in your cabinet for more than 6 or 7 months, I would get some new ones. Fortunately, they're not real expensive, so you can always have fresh ones available. And we're going to give it a good whisk, and this will take place of sifting. So if you want to sift it instead with a strainer, or if you have a flour sifter, you could do that. But I just use the whisk. Stir it around real good. You want to get some air in there. Make sure there's no lumps. And then you dump it in. And this is where you want to go kind of gentle. You don't need to beat it anymore. We're just going to get the flour and the wet ingredients mixed in. We want to make sure that there's no lumps of flour. And you just want to mix it until it's combined. And this is the most important ingredient. I've left it out before and it changes it completely. So don't leave it out. It's 3 tablespoons of milk. You can use whole milk. You could use skim milk. I happen to be using oat milk here. But it's important. It really it changes the moisture content of the loaf. So don't forget this part. But here's where you want to go through and just make sure that there's no big lumps of flour. And be gentle with it. And once we get that all mixed up, we're going to put it in regular size loaf pan. And I like to grease my loaf pan with vegetable shortening. I don't like the cooking spray. It has a tendency to leave a residue on your pan, and then every time you use it, after a while, it'll get gummy on there and you can't get it off for anything. So I do it the old-fashioned way, the way Mom did it, with vegetable shortening. I don't think it adds any more calories. I don't think it makes any difference. If you want to use the cooking spray, use it. It's just that I prefer to use the vegetable shortening. You want to grease it really well because this does stay in the oven for an hour. It takes it longer to cook than it does to make it. So once we get that all greased up well, and we get our batter into the pan, and once you get it in there, you just want to give it like a little jiggle, maybe a real light tap, just to make sure that there's no big air bubbles in there. And this is going to bake, like I said, for an hour, a 350-degree oven. And I put it on a cookie sheet just so there aren't any accidents. Better safe than sorry. And you will want to, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to cook. It depends on your oven temperature, how accurate it is. So like at 50, 55 minutes, check it. see if it's done. It's always better safe than sorry. You want to stick it with a knife. I use a skewer. And if it comes out clean, then it's done. If it doesn't, stick it back in until it is. Maybe 5-minute increments if it's not quite done. But we'll get that back in. And I think it ended up cooking for, I think it was an hour and 10 minutes. So like I said, it depends on your oven, but I would definitely check it before the hour's up. Once it's done, you want to let it cool in the pan for a good 20-25 minutes. Then you want to run a knife around the edge of the pan, and you can, hopefully it pops out with no problems, and let it cool on a rack until you're ready to eat it. I will say that it is best once it's sat for like a day. The next day it's very moist, nice and soft. It's great with a cup of coffee, some juice, put a little peanut butter on it. This is a good one, and this definitely brings back some great memories. Thanks, Mom. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and I hope you give it a try and make some great memories of your own.